I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old on Old. And this week, we're going to be looking at a classic film in the film community, but maybe more classic outside the film community. I'm talking about none other than 1961's Breakfast at Tiffany's. So, if you guys are new to the series, what I do every single week is I break down a classic film I've never seen before. I talk about its historical context as to what makes it a classic, and then I also look at my thoughts, as this is a movie I'm seeing for the very first time, so I'm seeing if it holds up, what are some things that don't hold up, what are some things that do, and sort of why this is sustained and as a classic, and if I still think that it sort of holds up today. And Breakfast at Tiffany's, if you don't know, just a quick summary of the plot. It's about it's set in New York, and it's about a young sort of socialite New York woman who has doesn't really have a job, and then meets a man who also has a similar profession, and then sort of reveal her backstory to him, and eventually they fall in love. And it's sort of been deemed as a typical romantic comedy, but let's go a bit into the historical context and see why we sort of think this sort of way, at least. I mentioned up top about that historical significance just because I think that's incredibly important and really significant to the film. I didn't really like most old on old films. I want to see it because I've heard they're great movies from other film lovers or top 10 lists, or being in the film community, you hear certain movies are good, certain movies are classics. But Breakfast at Tiffany's hasn't really always had the reputation of it being an amazing movie. For me, it was always a movie that just existed, just always around, because of sort of this iconic image here and the character of Holly Golightly. I just think that the film, I didn't really go into this thinking it was going to be the best film of all time because it wasn't sort of hyped up to me that way. Into the historical context, though, some different communities sort of pick this up. For example, the fashion community. I think this movie really made Audrey Hepburn a star and made her really that movie star. I mean, everything she wore was now sort of a statement, and she was on the covers of all the magazines. The beautiful sort of costume wear in this movie was really impeccable, and I think that transitioned into sort of what was chic and what was hip, and really for a lot of people, Breakfast at Tiffany's and Audrey Hepburn in particular became a style icon for her, a fashion icon. Maybe later on they went and discovered some of her other sort of better works, I'd say. But at the end of the day, a lot of sort of young girls even just have Breakfast at Tiffany's on their wall. Even though there may not be a fan of classic movie or anything, I think this may be one of the most popular classic movies for that reason. Because it's so synonymous with more than just film, that if you just heard, you don't want to look like the great film world, people would be taken inspired from this. And then, really, I guess, and it's also sort of known for being sort of very forward and about sex. It's very sort of casual in the way they treat it, very sort of mature in that sense, especially for the 60s. So a lot of times I know sort of the feminist movement has taken this movie because Holly, and not third wave but second wave feminists, has sort of taken on her sexuality and sort of embraces that, which is a big part of that movement. But really in the film community, I think, and really, I guess, in pop culture as well, but it has more to do with the film in that sense, is the character of Holly Golightly, and played by Audrey Hepburn. Like last week's episode with Atticus Finch and To Kill a Mockingbird, she is so synonymous with this movie and with this character that it's almost hard to separate the two between some people. I mean, some people only see her as this character, the same way some people only see Gregory Peck as Atticus Finch or Daniel Radcliffe as Harry Potter. These roles are so iconic and synonymous with them that sometimes it's hard to separate them. And I mean, even if you look up Audrey Hepburn, a lot of times you'll see just her picture, but then a lot of times you'll see the first movie scene you'll see of her will be from Breakfast at Tiffany's, and she's just sort of done a great job at sort of embodying this role. And really the historical context for me is sort of her long-lasting effect as a style icon, sort of aside from this movie, but also how she made this character sort of immortalized on screen in that same way. The film did well. It received 2 Oscars and was nominated for 5, including Audrey Hepburn for Best Lead Actress. That was also a good year, though. I think Judgment Nuremberg was that year, and West Side Story was that year. So there were a lot of good movies that year. I probably would have given it to Audrey Hepburn. She actually didn't win for her Oscar. That's just the way it goes. But unfortunately, aside from being this sort of great style icon and it's gone past the film community, and even within the film community, people recognize the sort of brilliance and really great, iconic performance. There's also sort of the dark underbelly of this film, which is the character of Mr. Unagashi, who is played by Mickey Rooney, a white man playing a Japanese man, and it's very racist. There's nothing redeeming about it at all. It leaves a very bad taste in your mouth, a very bad stain on the movie, where every time you cut back to it, you're like, oh, he's using his race for comedic effect, and sort of just this over-generalized stereotype. It's really bad. It's very cringy. It's just sad in a lot of ways, and I think it totally puts a stain on the movie. I wouldn't say watch this when sort of without the scenes, because they are there, they're part of the history. I have to mention historical context. So in a lot of ways, I was expecting this great sort of performance by Holly Golightly, but I was also expecting the sort of the progress of the femininity, to see this, how they treat sex in the 60s, but also how they sort of treated race in the 60s, and they still hadn't totally appreciated and still use it for sort of racist stereotypes. It's very bad. There's nothing redeeming about it. That's about all I can say. So just transitioning into my thoughts. I think I kept repeating to myself while the film was about, the film is so light on its feet. Now, that's something that's hard to really quantify, right? But let's start with the place. It's set in New York, but this is not Taxi Driver New York. It's not gritty, it's not grimy. It's almost like a fantasy land. Everything, it seems like it smells nice. Everything is so open. Everyone there is rich and can have all the time that they want, and it's just so fun, and no one has any cares in the world. They can just buy everything. They don't have to worry about anything. And it's sort of a great... the setting and the way the film is shot, and just how the characters perceive and act, and particularly Holly Golightly and Paul Varjak, played by Audrey Hepburn and George Peppard, respectively. They have a great sort of chemistry together, and they have sort of a bubbly, fun back and forth interplay, where Holly is always the sort of life of the party, and Paul sort of has a sort of smooth sort of charm to him. And I think just the film, overall, the sort of tone that the film strikes really is a sort of light, sort of fun, sort of almost... it's hard to quantify, but it's not sort of realistic, and it's not grounded. It's sort of like a fantasy world in that sense, almost like a musical, I'd say. But to be talking about everything, but it's sort of... just to say it's only light on its feet would be doing a great disservice to the movie, because the film at times has a really great, interesting underbelly to it, which I think, from my understanding, is more into the book and less in the film, which also ultimately may hurt the film, because I think Audrey Hepburn really, she's an incredible character. I talked about how amazing she is as a style icon, as this icon in film history, for the performance she portrayed, but I think she has a lot more nuanced performance, and it sort of blows out everyone else in the movie, because she has that great bubbly persona that's so light on its feet on the outside, but it's really the inner shell that we're trying to figure out, because she has some sort of a darkness to her. At times, it does a great job of showing how New York is this amazing place, but then the people within these that are having such a great time have some things, certain negative traits like selfishness and greed. There's a dark underbelly, and I think, although the romance wasn't really the driving force of the movie for me, a lot of times it was Holly and her arc, because really Paul doesn't have an arc at all. He's just sort of our window into Holly's world. But the way we see her trying to, like Paul, figure out more about her and trying to get more out of her, because we know there's something behind there, and that's because of Audrey Hepburn's performance. When Holly's sort of husband Doc shows up, we know, oh wait, is there more to this character? And we want to know more. And there's always, we see that there's that bubbly outside, but we see that in a lot of ways she can be selfish and has some negative traits as we sort of explore more about her, which is why the ending is so great, when she sort of confronts the reality that she really loves Paul and she's not looking for an older man. That's so sort of it just works very well, because it just takes almost a load off your chest, because it's like, oh, finally, she finally accepts it, because we're just trying to chip away and get to really the understanding of what she is. But unfortunately, I think that the filmmakers don't necessarily balance that tone a lot of times. At times, there's this great sort of contrast of the beautiful sort of pristine look of New York and the pristine sort of bubbly persona, and that's all great from the outside. Once you get in, there's really more sort of a selfish sort of dark undertone, with sort of the backstory of Holly, and even sort of the sort of the Brazilian husband. What's up with that? Sort of the morals behind the movie. Sometimes they sort of address how sort of wishy-washy and how kind of wrong a lot of times they can be, and the point just to marry an older man, there's no ambition to it. They sort of address the sort of negativity of that, but at times the film totally forgets that. For large portions of the movie, they just do that bubbly persona. So I question whether or not it's doing the right thing. I think Audrey Hepburn has a great rollover, because at times she does that great sort of bubbly persona, but at the times when we need to understand more about her character, we really understand more about it. But I think the film is mixed in a lot of ways, especially I think George Peppard really is sort of a boring character in how he's sort of written in terms of just his overall arc. Paul's arc isn't really helped by George Peppard. He can do what he can. I just think that ultimately he does nothing, which is kind of frustrating at times. And I think the film doesn't know what to say at the end of the day. Its tone is kind of mixed in those two ways. Sometimes it's like it nails it. I think the ending was really well done, and certain elements of the party scene were well done. But then other times, they're just shopping and stuff like that. It's kind of forgotten in a lot of ways, and that sort of selfish underpinning of it isn't really addressed the way I wanted to. I think this movie had sort of a brilliant depiction of glamour, but also the selfishness that comes with that lifestyle. Other times, it just forgot it, so that was a little frustrating. I think that really at the end of the day, despite that, the film does nail the lay on its feet sort of aspect to it, which for a lot of people can just be surface level and fun, and you watch it and you enjoy it and you forget about it. And I mean, I can't believe I haven't even mentioned Henry Mancini's incredible sort of jazzy score, which is similar to, say, the Pink Panther score, which he did. And at the end of the day, this may be the romantic comedy Fight Club, where people may sort of get the wrong thing out of the film, but that doesn't mean the film doesn't exist the way it is. I still like Fight Club because I interpret it one way, other people may interpret it other ways. And this movie, I see one thing out of it, which can be frustrating at times, but that doesn't still take away the greatness and the great moments that really do nail that. At the end of the day, you hear Yanni, I hear Laurel. That's about it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Let me know your thoughts on Breakfast at Tiffany's. And then the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be releasing these old episodes, the last couple ones, and then really transitioning into the old sort of the old Oscar countdown. Oscar coverage for the rest only till February. I may do some other side projects here and there every once in a while. I have a couple of projects thinking about, but definitely check on the old Oscar countdown, because it's going to be a great year. I've already been to TIFF, seen some great movies, so I got a lot of thoughts. Stay tuned for that, but also stay tuned for the next upcoming old episodes. And hurry up before the series ends. Let me know in the comments down below some of the movies you want to hear me and sort of see me cover. That's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and until next time, stay tuned.